In all evils, adultery is the first. Is masturbation considered adultery and creates karma? Welcome back everyone to Mind Podcast. In all evils, adultery stands at the forefront. In the past, everyone knew about the scandal involving Miss X and the wealthy tycoon Y, related to a sexual contract. They were in a romantic relationship, and the 16.5 billion VND she received was agreed upon for their relationship over 7 years. The ancients have a saying, what goes around comes around. When people are born, they come with nothing, and when they leave, they also go empty-handed. Today, because people don't believe in karma, when misfortune strikes, they think it's just bad luck. However, these misfortunes are the results of numerous previous wrongdoings. If one understands karma, they wouldn't dare to commit crimes. For instance, if Tycoon Y didn't chase fleeting pleasures driven by lust, the temporary joy he felt was insignificant compared to the immense suffering he now faces. As a result, Tycoon Y lost money, his wife wants to end their marriage, his work is stalled due to the lawsuit, and people look at him with disdain. If weighed on scales, a wise person would choose what truly benefits them, rather than blindly stepping into such a mess. Similarly, for the beautiful Miss X, she is young and intelligent with a bright career ahead, but for the past 2 years, she has been entangled in this lawsuit, her reputation tarnished, and her career declining, leaving her anxious. Regarding family happiness, especially marital life, throughout his teachings, the Buddha repeatedly reminded women to maintain their chastity and men not to harbor adulterous thoughts. Adultery is classified as a grave sin. Those who commit adultery often harbor bad thoughts, words, and deeds. They destroy the happiness of their own and others' families. Understanding adultery correctly reveals that while it brings temporary pleasure, it results in severe karma. Some lose face, some lose their jobs, some destroy their families, and some become childless. A person destined for wealth and prosperity can become miserable and distressed throughout their life if they commit adultery. Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha discussed the issue of adultery and its consequences. An adulterer is seen as a murderer who destroys the future of a happy family. This doesn't even mention the negative impact on their children due to parental divorce caused by adultery. When a husband cheats, he satisfies himself, but his wife suffers. The wife's unease creates a tense family atmosphere, affecting their children. Thus, a cheating husband not only causes his wife pain, but also involves all family members in suffering, including himself. The suffering caused by adultery spreads like a virus, quickly destroying family happiness. Speaking of the other woman, the third party, they might feel triumphant for capturing the man's affection. But one day, they realize the man only sees them as an object, coming when he's bored and leaving when he's done. They might think that being with a wealthy man will bring lifelong happiness, believing they'll have a different life once married. However, karma comes unexpectedly. For Miss X, karma arrived early, making her endure visible consequences. A woman who causes another's family to break apart must face similar karma. Adulterers bear public scorn, live with guilt, and the severity depends on their actions. Many think only killing shortens one's life, but in reality, adultery also attracts serious diseases, financial ruin, loss of blessings, and shortens lifespan. Moreover, after death, they might fall into hell to endure suffering. Thus, the lawsuit involving Miss X serves as a warning to those intending or already committing adultery. One should not destroy their own or others' families due to momentary weakness or temptation. Not everyone understands adultery correctly, as it depends on specific circumstances. However, generally, compassionate, ethical, and morally cultivated people maintain a pure and respectful mind. They use purity to nurture their virtues and righteous thoughts to resist evil desires. Ignorant people, focused only on current benefits and desires, lack foresight and easily commit adultery. Some lose their lives, some lose their positions, some destroy their families, and historically, some even end their lineage. The virtuous person knows this is a great misfortune and strictly avoids it, thus maintaining their virtues and enjoying blessings. In contrast, the petty person sees it as great happiness and falls into it, resulting in evil consequences. Fortune or misfortune doesn't come naturally, but is the result of past actions. Moreover, indulging in lust and sensual pleasures comes very quickly. Nowadays, people chase temporary pleasures, forgetting core values, becoming ignorant. Only those who lack fear dare to act indulgently. If they don't repent, they will face karma's punishment. They might deceive others but can't deceive themselves. Knowing they've done wrong, they feel anxious and disturbed. Additionally, everything they do is known and recorded by deities, even the smallest details. The virtuous person always behaves properly, even when alone, knowing that deities observe from above. Even in darkness, without anyone around, they don't dare indulge in desires and maintain strict self-discipline daily. The ancients have a saying, "In all evils, adultery stands first." The harsh outcomes of those who engage in adulterous acts have been witnessed and passed down through generations. As soon as the thought of lust arises, various evil intentions follow, leading to sinful actions and the destruction of all virtuous thoughts. Such lustful desires can even lead to the intent to harm others to satisfy oneself, eroding one's integrity and moral values. The ancients also said that a person who cultivates even a single pure thought receives blessings from the heavens. When faced with life's obstacles, we often tend to escape, making us weak in the face of desires, leading to further mistakes. If we understand that indulging in desires cannot bring true happiness, we will recognize that it often leaves us feeling empty or guilty, having lost our direction. Persisting on a wrong path only leads to more suffering. Therefore, it is wise to turn back and start anew. If one cultivates themselves enough to recognize that in all evils, adultery stands first, and thus resists lustful desires, they can unexpectedly bring great blessings upon themselves. Ancient Chinese texts record numerous examples of this, serving as timely warnings for people to control their desires, restore their conscience, and cultivate virtue, becoming pure and noble individuals. Only by correcting oneself can one regain fortune and avoid disaster. During the Ming Dynasty, there was a scholar named Sun Hao. His family was poor, so he had to cross the river to teach and make a living. Later, he worked for the Zhang family on West Street, doing clerical work in exchange for food. One late night, a maid from the Zhang family secretly came to Sun Hao's room. Knowing her intentions, Sun Hao loudly proclaimed, "The ancient texts say that the three corpses' spirits always follow and record our every mistake. Do you think the heavens are unaware of what happens in the quiet of the night?" Sun Hao sternly rejected her. However, a teacher from the Zhang family witnessed this incident. The teacher secretly summoned the maid. On the Dragon Boat Festival, this teacher suddenly developed severe ulcers all over his body, which could not be treated. The Zhang family then invited Sun Hao to take over as the teacher. One day, Sun Hao met his uncle at the riverbank. His uncle was surprised and said, "My son was ill, so I went to the city god temple to pray. I stayed overnight and dreamt of the city god seated in his hall. The city god called his subordinates to present the register of those destined to die of starvation. As the names were read, I heard your name. I asked the city god why your fate was changed. The city god replied, Sun Hu was destined to die of starvation at the age of 46 in a foreign land. However, on the night of April 18th this year, he sternly rejected the advances of a maid, thus extending his life by 24 years and changing his fate from starvation to prosperity." Hearing this, his uncle continuously congratulated Sun Ho. In the following years, Sun Hao's students increased, and his annual tuition income reached over 100 taels of gold. In the 36th year of Wanli, when Sun Hao was 46, there was indeed a severe famine, and rice became extremely expensive. Many poor people couldn't afford it, and countless died of starvation. However, Sun Ho not only survived, but also became wealthy. In his old age, his family remained affluent. He passed away peacefully at the age of 70, fulfilling the prophecy of a 24-year life extension. Dear friends, many people wonder whether masturbation is considered adultery. In today's society, many self-proclaimed experts encourage masturbation as a way to avoid marital infidelity and the resulting family breakdowns. People worry and wonder if masturbation is a sin, fearing severe karma after death if it is. However, understanding adultery correctly reveals that masturbation is not considered adultery. But don't celebrate too quickly, because this seemingly harmless action can be the root cause of many frightening consequences, perhaps even worse than adultery itself, which you might not foresee. We understand masturbation as the act of self-stimulation combined with fantasies about erotic subjects to achieve sexual pleasure. Today, the power of information technology bombards us with erotic images, pornographic films, explicit clips, and seductive pictures, flooding our lives through various media and social networks. This saturation has led many to view it as normal, considering those who do not conform to this trend as outdated. Such information infiltrates the minds of both adults and children, stirring up desires. If people continue to follow these urges, it drives them to seek sexual satisfaction. When circumstances don't allow, they often resort to masturbation, believing it helps relieve psychological stress and reduce tension. However, this is merely an excuse to justify their actions, creating an opportunity to indulge in sexual desires. Over time, it becomes a habit with unforeseen consequences. Though Buddhism does not specifically address masturbation, the Buddha warned about the dangers of uncontrolled desires in emotional life, leading to severe consequences if not appropriately regulated. In reality, those who masturbate often lack the ability to control their desires, easily falling into excessive indulgence, which affects not only their health but also their personal and familial blessings, often without their knowledge. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha taught, monks who are accomplished in 4 aspects are destined to fall into hell. What are these 4 aspects? 1 is engaging in sexual misconduct. 2 is encouraging others to engage in sexual misconduct. 3 is accepting sexual misconduct. And 4 is praising sexual misconduct. Monks who are accomplished in these 4 aspects are destined to fall into hell. From a Buddhist perspective, masturbation can be seen as sexual misconduct. So, even if you find an answer to whether masturbation is considered adultery, you must understand that while it may not be adultery, it still results in unfavorable karma. According to Buddhist precepts, masturbation falls under unwholesome thoughts and behaviors, seen as misconduct in an expanded sense. Although not as severe as being unfaithful to one's spouse, it still carries corresponding karmic consequences. To experience true happiness in this human realm, one must practice sexual restraint, protect oneself, and maintain virtue. If one indulges in satisfying carnal desires through improper means, both body and mind will weaken, ethical standards will decline, and one might eventually commit serious crimes. While it is often underestimated, the lustful karma has a powerful influence on individual lives. Without transformation and control, it can lead to numerous sins. This is also one of the reasons why sexual crimes are increasingly prevalent in society today. Those who frequently engage in these behaviors have a darkened spirit, and as a result, their virtue and prosperity diminish. This bad habit is extremely dangerous and greatly destroys our merit. They become more distorted in their thinking, mentally unstable, and dissatisfied with those around them, gradually leading to discord. Their lives become unstable, and nothing they do succeeds. Research findings on masturbation indicate that addicts have lower concentration levels than those who rarely masturbate. Frequent masturbators often feel tired, find it difficult to concentrate on studies and work, and experience anxiety and discomfort. High-frequency masturbation can adversely affect the central nervous system and lead to other symptoms such as testicular pain, memory decline, and physical exhaustion. Overindulging in masturbation can lead to addiction, causing constant preoccupation with this issue. Furthermore, after each act of masturbation, men tend to feel guilty because they know this action is harmful. Although society today has a more open attitude towards masturbation, many still consider it sinful and feel self-reproach. Therefore, do not easily believe the claims of some doctors or experts who say that sexual misconduct or masturbation is harmless. In reality, the dangers of masturbation are significant. It causes problems that are not immediately apparent, and we unknowingly suffer the harmful consequences of masturbation. Desire is a major issue for humanity in general and for religion in particular. Correctly understanding desire and having an appropriate attitude towards it is crucial. In Buddhism, desire is not entirely evil or sinful, as the Buddha allows householders to live with desires according to humanistic and ethical standards. However, in monastic life, renouncing desire is a fundamental criterion for noble and aspirational living. Desire is a factor related to the downfall of a person. Understanding desire and how to transform it is extremely important in the ascetic life of a monk. Although the methods of transforming desire mentioned in the scriptures mainly pertain to monastics, in today's era where the presence of evil is increasing and is somewhat related to managing sexual energy, the methods of transforming desire taught by the Buddha are valuable references for anyone seeking self-mastery. Based on our initial survey, we summarize the methods of transforming desire taught by the Buddha in the Nikaya Sutras as follows. First, do not look directly. This was the Buddha's advice to Ananda in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. Not looking directly means avoiding and not approaching desires. Although this method is classical, its practical value transcends historical and spatial boundaries. The mind and the environment are closely connected. The mind easily develops improper thoughts when encountering corresponding desires. However, in real life, it is not always possible to avoid conditions that give rise to desires, and sometimes one must face them. In such cases, the Buddha teaches not to converse with them. Not conversing means not interacting with female beauty. Once the mind starts comparing and thinking, it creates attachment in the heart. Beauty is an undeniable reality. An ordinary person can recognize beauty when it is present. However, seeing beauty and becoming attached to it are two entirely different things. Here, the first method the Buddha taught is not to look directly, not to approach, not to converse, not to contact, and not to hold on to them in the mind. These are auxiliary measures to prevent desire from arising. This method is summarized by the Buddha in the All Defilement Sutra. Defilements must be eliminated through avoidance. Anchuttam Sutra also asserts similarly. For instance, a person with eyes who does not want to see the forms within their sight can close their eyes or look aside. The argument from the above sutras confirms that one of the initial methods to prevent and transform desire is not to look at or to avoid them. Secondly, consider them as relatives. Monastics often preach according to circumstances. So encountering women on their alms rounds and sometimes having to preach to them is a common event in many scriptures. The case of Venerable Pindola is a typical example. According to the scriptures, Venerable Pindola often flew in the air and chose King Udena's royal garden in Kabi as a place for meditation. During that time, the king and his entourage of maidens were in the garden. As the king fell asleep, the maidens wandered off and encountered Venerable Pindola. They listened to his teachings and forgot their duties. Waking up in anger, King Udena intended to impose the harshest punishment on Venerable Pindola. However, upon hearing the Venerable's explanation, "O great king, the blessed one, the wise, the all-seeing, the arahant, the perfectly enlightened one has said, 'Come, monks, regarding those who are only mothers, anchor your mind as a mother. Regarding those who are only sisters, anchor your mind as a sister. Regarding those who are only daughters, anchor your mind as a daughter.'" Particularly, Venerable Pindola affirmed to the king that, "When I entered the inner palace with a guarded body, guarded speech, guarded mind, anchored mindfulness, and restrained faculties, at that time, desire did not conquer me." Understanding this, King Udena repented and sought refuge as a disciple with the Venerable. The Venerable then performed a miraculous flight back to Jetavana Monastery. In this method of transforming desire, the support of two important virtues is necessary: shame and dread. Shame is self-regret, and dread is regret in the eyes of others. These are the two fundamental virtues shaping human ethical personality, because once strangers are regarded as relatives, one must behave according to the standards of relatives. To act correctly, one must know shame. According to the Anguttara Nikaya, these two virtues protect the world. Thanks to these virtues, one can recognize who is a mother, sister, wife, or relative. Living as a human being, one must know shame and dread. Without shame and dread, the world's moral order will fall into chaos, similar to the behavior of goats, chickens, ducks, pigs, and dogs. As mentioned in the Ambalathika Rahulavada Sutta, if a person lacks shame and dread, there is no evil they would not dare to commit. The metaphor of a young man who loves jewelry but is forced to wear the carcass of a dog, snake, or animal around his neck, always feeling disgusted and ashamed, is an impressive image of using the energy of shame and dread to reduce and transform desire. The third method is contemplating impermanence and impurity. Contemplating the decay of the body is an effective method for transforming desire. According to the Great Painfulness Discourse, the Buddha taught the monks the contemplation of a beautiful woman's life. According to the Buddha, one should focus on observing the maiden from her youthful prime to her old age with a wrinkled face and pale limbs. The contemplation should focus on her sickness, dirtiness, and lying in her own waste. Particularly, contemplate the changes in her body after death when it is thrown into the charnel ground. This is when insects and worms eat away at her body, and in the end, only a white skeleton remains. According to the Dhammapada commentary, by pointing out the reality of impermanence and impurity, the Buddha converted the devotee Rupananda. Many bhikkhunis in the Therigatha also attained liberation through these two contemplations. The contemplation of impermanence appears very frequently and is used in many contexts. The dialogue between the Buddha and Rahula also falls into this category. What do you think, Rahula? Is the I permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Blessed One. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Blessed One. Is it appropriate to regard what is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change as, this is mine, this is I, this is myself? No, Blessed One. This kind of conversation is cited in many scriptures. In the Satipatthana Sutta and the Kayasati Sutta, the contemplation of impurity is detailed and clear. According to the Buddha, one should contemplate the 32 impure parts of the body, from hair, nails, teeth, etc., to feces and urine. Practitioners must observe these 32 impure parts thoroughly and skillfully. The level of proficiency in contemplation must be similar to recognizing a small grain of rice in a pile of mixed grains poured out on the floor. Contemplating and maintaining awareness of the body's impurity will create superior self-control. For a practitioner proficient in impurity contemplation, they cannot find beauty, attraction, or allure in any human body, whether female or otherwise. The shocking story of Bhikkhuni Subha, who was harassed because of her beautiful eyes and gouged out her eye to give to her obsessive admirer, causing him to flee in horror, shows the proficiency in the contemplation of impermanence and impurity of the body. Proficiency in this contemplation eliminates worldly thoughts and desires. Contemplating the nature of desire, deeply contemplating its nature, is discussed in vivid metaphors from the Patala Sutta and others. For example, desire is like a bone and a hungry dog. A bone stripped of all meat, and the seeker of desire is like a hungry dog trying to find something to eat from that bone. No matter how hard it tries, the dog cannot satisfy its hunger with the bone devoid of any nourishment. Some interpretations even expand on the image of the hungry dog, bleeding from the mouth due to its efforts, licking its own blood and mistaking it for nourishment from the bone, leading to its own exhaustion. Secondly, desire is like a piece of meat in a flock of hawks. The story tells of a hawk with a piece of meat being attacked by other hawks with sharp beaks and claws. Only when it lets go of the meat does it find peace, while those holding onto the meat suffer. From this event, the Buddha's previous life reflects that our desires are like pieces of meat. Whoever grasps them suffers, whoever lets go finds peace. Thirdly, desire is like a prisoner near a burning pit. A burning pit of coals with a prisoner being dragged towards it by two strong men. Faced with the pit's heat, the prisoner will struggle to escape the strong men's grip. A similar story is told in the Anguttara Nikaya, where the Buddha cleverly asked the monks, "What do you think, monks? Is it better to embrace and sit or lie near a large burning fire, or to embrace and sit or lie near the soft, youthful limbs of a noblewoman, a Brahmin woman, or a householder's daughter?" After hearing their response, the Buddha confirmed that when the mind is foul, filled with desire and unclean, suffering and misfortune are worse than being thrown into a burning pit. Fourthly, desire is like climbing a tree to pick fruit. There's a fruitful tree sought by many. After a series of efforts, they find the tree. Some climb high to pick fruit, while others try to gather what is within reach. However, those who cannot climb but still crave the sweet fruit will cut down the tree to satisfy their desires, unaware that their actions endanger others. A similar meaning is found in the Udana Sutta. The story tells of two groups infatuated with a courtesan, fighting fiercely with dangerous weapons, resulting in many deaths and near-death suffering. The Great Painfulness Discourse also tells a similar story. Climbing a tree to pick fruit is dangerous, just as infatuation with beautiful women leads to suffering. Fifthly, desire is like borrowed wealth. A person with borrowed wealth, though it belongs to others, feels joyous and confident. They are praised and respected wherever they go. They live in this state for so long that they believe the wealth is truly theirs. When the time comes for the owner to reclaim it, they feel sorrow and suffering. According to the Adultery Nikaya, wealth is threatened by kings, thieves, enemies, inferiority, fire, and water. Here, beauty and happiness are merely the result of many factors combined, as life is a blend of interdependent elements. Clinging to them inevitably leads to distress and suffering. Dear friends, when desire reigns, suffering follows. The interdependence between desire and suffering is a harsh reality pointed out by the Buddha to humanity. The peril of female beauty is a painful experience marked in many historical records. For an ordinary person, it takes significant effort to master and overcome the challenge of female allure. For a monastic with a vow of self-liberation and helping others, their ideal journey does not include traces of desire. The nature of desire and the methods of transforming it have been clearly taught by the Buddha. The success of transformation depends on each individual's focus and effort.